Nothing trending here, right? These massive military so-called drills in South Korea have North Korea so upset they're lobbing missiles of their own towards the South. It's not war yet, but it's the most war-like the North and South have been in more than 60 years. Add that to Russian troops building along the Ukrainian border, and now Vladimir Putin saying something about Finland being more Russian than European, and you would think the United Nations would be holding an emergency session. Well, you'd be right. Except not over these changes. Try climate change. Claudia Rosett, you can't make this up. You cannot make this up. Incredible.
No, Neil. This is the UN outdoing itself on completely perverse priorities.
Why this when the world is literally, blowing up on them?
Well, because the UN does very well out of the climate change gravy train. It's something that is immensely complex, is very hard for people to sort of address one way or the other, because the UN just comes back and says we have a gazillion amorphous, opaque studies, and because the UN is funded for all these things, and at the same time the UN is apparently incapable of doing things to actually stop. North Korea is also threatening its next nuclear test right now, possibly in a form that would work very well with Iran. It might be an enriched uranium-based test this time. And as Russia digests a piece of its neighboring country, the UN is sort of expressing dismay. But Neil, the rules of the New World Order that the UN is pioneering here are that it's all right for Russia to chew off pieces of its neighbors. It's all right for rogue states to test nuclear weapons and develop them. But it is not all right for you to exhale without paying tax to the United Nations.
You know what I don't understand, and you've covered this body far longer than have I, and touche for that, but that let's say whatever your views on climate change, whether you accept it, reject it, doubts about it, or keen on it, I would just imagine in the alarming crises going on around the world right now, the far more pressing and immediate would be any of the ones you just mentioned, North Korea and South Korea, increasingly bellicose, Russia. We left out Venezuela and what's happening there. I mean, Latin America could be imploding as we speak. That I would look at climate change, but say these more immediate changes warrant attention, like pronto, but they're not.
Oh, these are the job of the UN. The UN is here to stop wars. Was not actually founded to change the climate of the planet, nor is it actually clear that it can do any such thing. This is sort of chasing after this great amorphous, but for the UN, remunerative fancy, while real wars are shaping up right here and now, and the UN is doing just nothing that matters to stop them.
But I notice even in addressing climate change, the cost would be borne by a select few nations, and not those that are the real culprits of the problem. But again, that's in keeping with the UN, I guess.
Yeah, it's a huge wealth transfer they want, Neil, and part of the wealth goes to them, whereas preventing wars apparently is something the UN just doesn't consider an interesting brief these days.
Amazing. So boring, that stopping world war nonsense. Claudia, thank you very much. Great having you again.
Thank you, Neil.
Well,